we are discussing one of the most famous or infamous of the local winds called as the Sirocco winds. These winds are otherwise also referred to as the sandstorms of Sahara Desert. So what is the mechanism, how it originates, in what time of the year, and what are they called as in different parts of the countries in and around Sahara Desert. So what happens here is, the Sahara Desert is a hot tropical desert. It is a desert with very hot conditions. But remember, this is a zone of high pressure cell because of the air subsiding here. This is the subtropical belt. Now many of you have a problem with this. On one hand, we call this as hot conditions, warm conditions, the land is very hot, and we assume that the air must start rising because it is hot. On the other hand, I'm saying this is a zone of sinking air related to the Earth's rotation and the dynamic conditions that creates and forces the air to sink down. So the general rule that we apply, if it is warm air, the air must rise. If it is cold air, the air must sink. This is the thermal rule. It is possible for a warm air to sink if it is dynamically forced. It is possible for cold air to rise if it is dynamically forced. So if this is the surface of the earth, in general, warm air should be rising, and in general, cold air should be sinking. But if I have some warm air, it should rise, but there is an impact of dynamic modifications, an impact related to Earth's rotation. This warm air is forced to sink down. This is a kind of a force that counters the thermal force. Similarly, if there is a cold air and I expect it to sink, but because of dynamic conditions, the cold air can now start rising. So you ought to understand, the pressure patterns on the globe are not only because of the thermal conditions. The thermal conditions can be applied for equator. The thermal conditions can be applied at very small scales of comparing two surfaces. You can apply that to the polar regions. So equatorial warm air rising, polar cold air sinking. Land is hot in the daytime, water is cool in the daytime, and we can have a gradient here. Land is cold in the night time, sinking air. Water is relatively warmer in the night time, rising air, and we have the sea breeze and the land breeze. So that's a thermal condition. What I am referring to is the dynamic aspect. So keeping this dynamic aspect in mind, the Sahara region, despite its tropical, subtropical location, despite these areas being very, very hot, air is actually sinking. The Sahara region becomes a zone of high pressure. In fact, it is this high pressure that is the most important reason why these latitudes become desert. So the Sahara high pressure, the Arabian high pressure, these high pressures are related to the sinking air conditions. So once you understand that, what we now understand is this sinking air should move out. If this is the surface and the air is forced to sink, the sinking air will be forced to move out in all direction. And that's what's happening for Sahara. The sinking air is forcing the air towards the Mediterranean, the air towards Sudan and Arabian Sea. The air is forced towards the Gulf of Guinea coast. And this air carries with itself lot of sand and dust, and they are dry. These winds, local winds, are dry dust storms, dry sandstorms, and they can be pretty powerful, carrying with them enormous amount of dust and sand, and they have their own local consequences. So high pressure conditions of Sahara, sinking air at Sahara, and the air being forced out. So in Egypt, we call this air being forced out is the Khamsin winds. They're all variants of Sirocco winds. So we have the Khamsin winds. Along Libya, we call these as Ghibli. Around Tunisia, we call this as Chihli. The winds leaving Morocco, Algeria towards Spain is called as Levech. The air moving towards Sudan is called as Habub. The wind towards Sudan is called as Habub. Habubs. The air of the winds of Arabia, okay, while moving out in parts of Qatar, in parts of UAE, Oman, we call these as simoons. So all of them have the same nature, but they've got different names. So you understand the mechanism of why they happen. You know the local names, and you know the conditions, that they are dry, that they are sand, they are hot. Temperatures of these can be around 40 degrees centigrade and more sometimes. So hot dusty winds and the enormity of sand, they become sandstorms. Now when this dry dusty wind crosses the Mediterranean, it can pick up lot of moisture. It can pick up lot of water from the air above Mediterranean, because it's warm air, it will force some amount of evaporation. And this air, while crossing Mediterranean, it causes rains in parts of Italy, in parts of southern France, along the Adriatic region. So this rain will have lot of dust. So it rains down like blood rains. There can be a layer and coating of dust along with the moisture that forces down with the winds. We call these as the blood rains. Reading from the textbook Savindra Singh Climatology, page number 124, a short write-up. I'll read up some specific lines. It says, Sirocco is a warm, page 124, Sirocco, the first line. Sirocco is a warm, dry and dusty local wind which blows in northerly direction. Now this is an error. It's actually southerly. If I look at these winds, it becomes northerly here. So this, you can remove this word northerly alone. It's in fact more of them are southerly. They come from south towards the north. You name the winds from where they come. So winds which blow in southerly direction from Sahara Desert, and after crossing over Mediterranean reach Italy, Spain, etc. Sirocco becomes very strong and active at the time of origin of cyclonic storms over Mediterranean Sea. So if the Mediterranean has cyclonic storms, this wind moving can take a lot of moisture and rain along the coasts of Italy. And what we have mentioned here is, it becomes extremely warm and dry while descending through the northern slopes of Atlas Mountains. There are different names for Sirocco in Africa: Khamsin in Egypt, Ghibli in Libya, Chihli in Tunisia, and the warm, dry, dusty winds in the Arabian desert are called as simoons or simoons. Sirocco, while passing over Mediterranean, picks up moisture and yields rains. And they're called as the blood rains because of the red sand that falls along with the rains. So the mention for Habub is on page 125, first line. Vigorous during late winters and early spring, and the hot damp wind laden with sand is called as Habubs in southern margins of Sahara, mainly in Sudan. So series of local names. These winds are very well depicted in your Goching Leong textbook. If you look at the chapter of deserts type of climate, we have some good nice picture of the winds of the Sahara. I hope this part is now clear. You can look up other videos to discuss some of the other local winds also. Thank you.